Peace, love, liberty, radio.
And the walls come crashing down as the war at home reaches your town. You have no choice, it's safe and clean. We all submit to the war machine.
Yeah, it's Wednesday. It is Wednesday. Today is Wednesday, the day where I answer your questions. It's the Ask Me Anything episode of Peace, Love, Liberty Radio. And I've only got a couple of questions this week, but they're good ones. And they're not necessarily questions that are going to take me the entire show to answer. As you know, like there have been times where I've taken almost the entire show to answer a single question. And, well, the questions that I have, they're probably not going to take me the entire show, but there is some big news to talk about, and I'll get into that after I answer the questions. So the first question that I'm going to answer was actually the last question to be asked. And it was asked of me this morning, and it's pertaining to some very important news. And as you may or may not be aware, I do a daily 5-minute newscast. I, every day of the week, produce a 5-minute newscast. I've been doing it for exactly 2 years. And there have only been 3 days in the last 2 years that a newscast from FPP Radio News was not produced. Those were days that I was in jail and unable to produce a newscast. I was also unable to hire someone to do that in my stead. And then of all of the days that the newscast has been produced over the last 2 years, there's only been one day where I did not voice the news. And that was after I lost my voice at Keenvention. And the video of my epic, awesome voice-stealing speech should be published on Friday, which would be 2 days from today. Whenever that happens, I will, post the link around to where you can watch the speech that took my voice. But I digress and continue to the point of the question. So, on today's newscast, there was a comment in one of the Facebook groups that I'm on where I share the link to the newscast. The comment was, "What? No news about the Free State Project hitting their goal of 20,000 signers?" And my response was, "I'll talk about it on Peace, Love, Liberty Radio." And I had intended to do that anyway, but the fact that there was a question gives me an excuse. And also the reason that I didn't include it in the newscast is because there was not an official, at the time that I wrote the newscast and recorded the newscast, which are not necessarily at the same time, because I generally will write the newscast before I go to bed, record it first thing in the morning. But at the time, there was not an official statement, but there since has been an official statement put out by the Free State Project, and I will share that with you now. The press release comes from the website prweb.com, which is one of these press release aggregator distribution sort of websites. Headline, Free State Project triggers the move. 20,000 libertarians to move to New Hampshire in next 5 years. And again, this is a press release dated February 3rd, 2016. As of today, reads the press release, the Free State Project is the most successful intentional migration movement in American history. This is because today the organization has announced that 20,000 participants have signed the statement of intent to move to New Hampshire, where they will, quote, exert their fullest practical effort toward the creation of a society in which the maximum role of government is the protection of individuals' right to life, liberty, and property, end quote. The 20,000 mark is significant because it triggers the move, the mass migration of the Free State Project participants, who have all agreed to move to New Hampshire within the next 5 years. So far, almost 2,000 have already located into the state. And I actually modified the wording here. They say have relocated to the state. That's technically not a true statement, because there were, I believe, 273 Free State Project participants that were in the state of New Hampshire before the vote happened. And there are currently 1,900, just over 1,900 Free State Project participants in the state of New Hampshire. So you take the 1909 number, which is what's on the Free State Project's website, subtract off 273, and then you have roughly 1,630-something, I believe. I'm trying to do math in my head while I also talk. And yeah, so I think it's 1,633 actual movers. But again, 1,900 that are actually in state. So just under 10% of the signers are actually in New Hampshire already. The press release continues with a quote from Carla Garrick, president of the Free State Project, who says, "In the last few months, using various social media targeting tools, we expanded our audience and a significant number of new people signed the pledge. Early movers have already made their mark on the Granite State by passing life-saving drug reform legislation, expanding school choice, and protecting First Amendment rights. This has drawn in a whole new crowd of participants. Just imagine what can be accomplished with 10 times as many people." And I will withhold thought on some of the things mentioned here until the conclusion of me reading the press release, and then I'll go back and give some thoughts on various aspects of this. The press release continues. Since the first early movers flocked to New Hampshire, the Free State Project participants have followed their individual passions to the center of some of the state's most contentious political fights. They were instrumental in organizing resistance to Real ID in 2008, legalizing same-sex marriage through the legislature in 2009, and establishing a medical cannabis program in 2013. Now, I know that I said I will withhold comment, but I want to mention the importance of one of the things mentioned here of the three, what they highlight as three political victories, and that's the legalization of same-sex marriage through the legislature. New Hampshire was the first state where same-sex marriage was legalized in that manner. The other states that had previously legalized same-sex marriage in the U.S., same-sex marriage was legalized through the courts. It had not been legalized through the legislature or through a legislative body until that happened in New Hampshire in 2009. Something similar is cannabis legalization. And yes, we don't have cannabis legalization in New Hampshire. However, New Hampshire's House, the House of Representatives of the New Hampshire General Court, that's the official name of the legislature, the House of Representatives of the General Court was the first legislative body to pass full cannabis legalization in early 2015 or early 2014, I believe. And that was done after there were, things that wound up passing through ballot initiatives. So the cannabis legalization that happened in Colorado and Washington and Oregon and Alaska, those all happened through ballot initiative processes, not through the legislature. And, well, we don't have ballot initiative here in New Hampshire, so it's something that I think is important. Other people disagree because they say, well, bad things can wind up getting passed through as well when you have ballot initiative. And yeah, sometimes bad things do pass through, but a lot of good stuff passes as well. There's more. Stay tuned.
Bitcoin Not Bombs is a launching pad for nonprofits and social entrepreneurs into the financial freedom of the Bitcoin economy. Bitcoin Not Bombs offers premium publicity campaigns designed to facilitate an organization's adoption of Bitcoin as a payment system. Bitcoin Not Bombs is fully committed to being the hub of the nonprofit sector of the Bitcoin economy, maximizing the potential cross-promotion of all our clients and commercial partners. To learn more, visit bitcoinnotbombs.com. You can support FPP Radio by shopping online. Whether you're looking for precious metals, bitcoins, or books, you'll find that and more at shop.fppradio.com. Every purchase you make from one of my affiliates, like Namecheap, Spendabit, and Amazon at shop.fppradio.com helps fund FPP Radio. Or you can shop directly from FPP with Bitcoin in the Bitcoin store. That's shop.fppradio.com. The Doublespeak Dictionary by Leslie Starr O'Hara satirizes the marked difference between the ideal of we the people and the reality of we the elite, while offering an insightful glimpse into the clockworks of the totalitarian mind. Ever irreverent but never irrelevant, the Doublespeak Dictionary serves as a subversive and humorous but timely reminder that the emperor has no clothes. The Doublespeak Dictionary is available from Amazon.com and all major bookstores.
You're listening to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio with Darrell W. Perry. Online at fppradio.com.
So before I jump back into the press release here, I want to make sure that I tell you, aside from joining the Free State Project, something you can do if you're fed up with the government running or ruining every aspect of your life, you should listen to the Lava Flow podcast. What's that? You're not listening? What is wrong with you? Go right now to thelavaflow.com/listen. The Lava Flow podcast, channeling the flow of information to the libertarian, anarcho-capitalist, voluntarist, and agorist community. Subscribe today using any podcatcher at thelavaflow.com/listen. Or just don't move to New Hampshire and go back to sucking up to the government. The Lava Flow podcast, striking the root every episode. Back now to the press release from the Free State Project about triggering the move. It's great, it's awesome, it's wonderful, and it's something that I've been looking forward to happening for a long time, and I'm pleasantly surprised that it happened as quickly as it did. Because if you recall, I did an episode, I think last summer, where I ran the numbers, and based on estimates of signer rate at the time, I thought it was going to be at the soonest the end of 2016, more likely middle or end of 2017. But, well, signer numbers got ramped up, and it got triggered on February 3rd. I believe it officially happened February 2nd, although press release came out today, February 3rd. The press release here continues. The Free State Project started in 2001 with an essay by Jason Sorens, who was then a graduate student at Yale. Sorens, who is now a lecturer at Dartmouth College, theorized that if 20,000 committed activists moved to a single state with a small enough population, they could push policy and culture in a more free, open direction. In 2003, early participants chose New Hampshire as the state to migrate to. Now that the move has been triggered, the Free State Project will continue the effort to attract more participants and inspire signers to move to the live free or die state sooner rather than later. And there's a quote here from, I can't tell from first looking, but the quote says, "I'm thrilled by how far the Free State Project has come since the essay." This is a quote from Jason Sorens. "I'm thrilled by how far the Free State Project has come since the essay I wrote 15 years ago. Freedom lovers from across the country have turned concept into reality by moving to New Hampshire and building all kinds of exciting efforts to secure liberty and prosperity for all. Efforts I could never have imagined back in 2001. Good ideas are powerful, and the idea of freedom is spurring many thousands of Americans to commit to move to the Granite State for a better life." And there's actually a little bit more in here. It talks about the upcoming Free State Project's Liberty Forum, February 18th through the 21st, where I will be. And it talks about a press conference that happened earlier today that I was unable to attend. But let me talk just a little bit. There's one or two things that I want to touch on about the Free State Project. Specifically, the question that I get asked often is, do you think that all 20,000 people are going to move? And my answer is no, but we don't need all 20,000 people to move. And what do I mean when I say that? Well, first off, there are a lot of people that signed the pledge that have probably forgotten that they've signed. There's also probably a fair number of people that signed the pledge that are no longer with us, meaning that they have passed away. There are also people that have signed the pledge that they've possibly changed their mind and they no longer intend to move to work towards the creation of a society where the maximum role of government is the protection of life, liberty, and justly acquired property. That aside, I really don't think that we need more than maybe 5,000 to 7,000 of the 20,000 people to actually wind up moving. And what do I mean when I say that? And why do I say that? Well, one thing you have to remember is that, one, there are people that love the ideas of liberty that did not sign because they're averse to putting their names on things. There are people that already live in New Hampshire that are very friendly towards the ideas of liberty that are signing as friends of the Free State Project. And I believe there are close to 4,000 people that are friends of the Free State Project. And then you add on the nearly 2,000 that are already here. Add to that what I expect to be another 5,000. So that's 7,000 Free State Project participants, plus the current 4,000 friends of the Free State Project. And I anticipate that that number of friends will double over the next 5 years while people are moving. So that would be another 4,000 on top of 4, which is 8 on top of 7, which gives you 15,000 people. And then you're going to have people that aren't going to sign as a friend of the Free State Project for the same reason that some people wind up moving, aren't going to sign as a participant or will no longer be allowed to sign as a participant. And I do think that you'll wind up having 20,000 small L libertarians in New Hampshire, but you don't need 20,000 out of 20,000 signers to move to New Hampshire. And again, that 20,000 number that I'm saying of small L libertarians does not include the people that like some of what libertarians stand for. And again, I'm saying small L libertarian, not large L. The difference being small L libertarian is not necessarily a member of the Libertarian Party. But I digress and continue. When you wind up having as many people that love the ideas of liberty in one place, and we've already seen what's happened with less than 10%, less than 2,000 Free State Project participants in state, there have already been changes to the way the state government operates. There have already been some successes of preventing the state government from doing horrible things. There have already been successes of repealing legislation to allow people to wind up getting life-saving medicine that they just a year ago would not have been able to get. And that specifically is the Narcan, which is an opioid blocker, something to where if somebody's overdosing on heroin and they get this shot of Narcan quick enough, they will not overdose and die. They will, it's, I don't know, the way that it works exactly, but I know that it does, and I know that paramedics are now allowed to carry this on their person. People are allowed to wind up getting this from a pharmacy without a prescription, and it's going to wind up saving lives. And that legislation was championed through by a freshman legislator who is a Free State Project participant. So, things are happening to where people are having more freedoms, lives are being saved because of Free State Project participants, and more of that will happen as more Free State Project participants wind up moving and more lovers of liberty wind up getting involved in the process in New Hampshire. So let me now jump to the other question that I have, and it actually looks like these two questions are going to take me the entire show, and I'm not going to be able to talk about the one item that I definitely wanted to talk about that was not a question that I received. The second question that I have, I was tagged in a post titled, "Why Don't Candidates Talk About Food?" And, well, since I am a presidential candidate seeking the Libertarian Party nomination, I feel that it's my duty to read this and give a candidate's point of view. In 1999, Darrell W. Perry began a search for traditional values, which led him down a path to the ideas of liberty. He tells the story in A Rebel's Journey, My Path to Liberty. Of the book, Dr. Brian Sovereign says, sometimes it's funny, and sometimes I think it's crazy, but it's always authentic. Find A Rebel's Journey, My Path to Liberty by Darrell W. Perry on Facebook, read reviews on Amazon, ask for A Rebel's Journey wherever books are sold, or visit arebelsjourney.com. You can support FPP Radio by joining the Fans program. Fans are friends, allies, and numerous supporters. Fans help FPP afford to produce more original content. You can join the Fans program for as little as $3 per month through Patreon and get perks like ad-free versions of FPP Radio News and Peace, Love, Liberty Radio. To learn more or to join the Fans program, visit fans.fppradio.com. That's fans.fppradio.com. In 2115 New England, there are no borders, no states, and no regulations, yet never has a more peaceful and prosperous place existed. But Mr. Drake's security company has seen better days. Faced with the prospect of waning power, Mr. Drake intends to replace the anarchy of New England with a government. But at what cost? And can anyone stop him? Anarchy in New England by Joe Jarvis is available from Amazon.com and all major bookstores.
You're listening to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio with Darrell W. Perry.
Before I read the article from the Des Moines Register, it's actually an editorial asking the question, why don't candidates talk about food? I want to make sure that I do tell you about something that I do talk about quite often. And occasionally I do talk about food. And not just a thing of, here's what I ate for supper. Or, here's what I had for lunch. Or here's a picture of my food. But I do talk about gold and silver and Bitcoin a good bit. And, well, where's a place that you can get gold and silver with Bitcoin? That would be Roberts & Roberts Brokerage. And for nearly 40 years, people have been buying gold and silver from Roberts & Roberts Brokerage because they've been a trusted source for buying gold and selling your gold and silver since 1977. That's 39 years. Well, depending on when in 1977 they were created, but nearly 40 years. Longer than I've been alive, Roberts & Roberts Brokerage has been a trusted source for buying and selling precious metals like gold and silver. And, well, they take Bitcoin for precious metal purchases, and they've even permanently removed the minimum purchase amount for all orders paid in the digital currency. So give them a call today for knowledgeable advice on buying and selling precious metals and a forward-thinking approach to new technologies. 800-874-9760. That's 800-874-9760. Or visit them online at rrbi.co. So the question here, why don't candidates talk about food? There's a fairly lengthy editorial talking about the First in the Nation Iowa caucuses, which happened on Monday. And I'm not going to go over the full results, but Donald Trump did not win on the Republican side. That was seen as quite an upset when Ted Cruz pulled off a victory. And a couple of the Republicans have already dropped out of the race. And I actually have an open letter to supporters of one of those candidates that I will post in the show notes. I will post the link to that open letter in the show notes. But let me get to the meat, no pun intended, but the meat of the editorial titled, Why Don't Candidates Talk About Food? Americans want to change the food system. That's the conclusion of research by Lake Research Partners and Bellwether Research and Consulting, which conducted focus groups last year in Des Moines, Raleigh, North Carolina, and Denver, Colorado. The group also did nationwide polling and found that 45% of respondents say their top priority is changing the food system to make healthy foods more affordable. 81% are very concerned that 1/3 of children today will develop type 2 diabetes. 75% are very or somewhat concerned that 5 of the 8 worst paying jobs in America are in the food system. 75% favor government incentives to encourage sustainable farming practices that protect the environment, and 50% want to limit government subsidies to the largest farm businesses. These views were expressed across party lines, and they should be heeded by candidates, so why aren't they talking about it? And then, before I give you my answer, I want to give you the conclusion that I think is being taken by the editorial board here of the Des Moines Register. They say perhaps candidates are afraid they would be seen as criticizing farmers. Yet many farmers recognize that they've been the victims of an industrialized farming system, according to Ricardo J. Salvador, a former Iowa State University agronomy professor who is director and senior scientist of the Food and Environment Program at the Union of Concerned Scientists. These farmers have watched their risk grow and their independence erode, forced to raise pigs or other livestock under contract to big companies. They've seen consolidation contribute to closed schools, shuttered stores, and hollowed-out communities. And I just want to give my thoughts here on some of the findings from this research, where they say the group did nationwide polling, found that 45% say their top priority is changing the food system to make healthy foods more affordable. And then the last finding is that 50% want to limit government subsidies to the largest farm businesses. Well, those two go hand in hand. And I'm surprised that it's only, well, actually, I'm not really surprised that it's only 50% that want to limit government subsidies. And again, they're saying only to the largest farm businesses, not to all farmers. And well, when you're talking to people in Des Moines, where basically, that's farm community, people get really protective about their subsidies. There are some farmers that they will, get really upset if you dare mention maybe we need to eliminate farm subsidies, because they'll say, no, that's how I wind up making a profit is farm subsidies. If we get rid of farm subsidies, I won't be able to sell my fill in the blank for a profit. So I need these government handouts to where I can wind up feeding my family. And well, one thing that you have to look at is that there are strings attached to these subsidies, that there are strings attached that wind up preventing some of these farmers from being able to sell their stuff at a sustainable price. There are strings and regulations attached that wind up preventing dairy farmers from being able to sell their milk directly to consumers. There are regulations attached to almost everything in the food system. And most people don't think about this, and most people don't realize a lot of these regulations that exist. And yes, some of these regulations that exist are completely independent from the subsidies. But again, it's something that the entire system needs to be overhauled. And nobody, at least, my perspective is because candidates like to pander for votes. That's why you're not hearing any of the Republicans or the Democrats saying we need to get rid of subsidies. And really, I'm guessing that the Republicans and Democrats don't want to get rid of the subsidies, that they might want to eliminate the subsidies for some people, but they don't want to blanket eliminate subsidies. And then there's the thing here that says 75% are very or somewhat concerned that 5 of the 8 worst paying jobs in America are in the food system. And that probably winds up including minimum wage workers at McDonald's, waiters and waitresses who wind up earning what's called the tipped salary, to where they're getting like $2.13 an hour from the employer, and then they make the rest of their money from their customers. So yes, that's going to look a little lower to where they're only making $2.13. That's a horrible rate, but they're actually making a lot more once you add in their tips. But again, this is not something that government should be involved in. Government should not be involved in setting prices of food. Government should not be involved in setting prices of labor. Government should not be involved in any aspect of this at all. That includes the whole mandatory labeling of GMO. yes, people should know what's in the products, but there should not be regulations specifying you have to list every ingredient, and it has to be in this point font, and you have to list this, that, the other thing, because that really winds up hurting the small farmers and small business owners, the ones that, have a few beehives and then they collect the honey. If you start adding all these regulations and whatnot, then that's going to wind up hurting the small farmer even more than what's already happening. That's the show. I'm done. I'll be back Friday, FPPRadio.com.